They say the hardest battles are fought abroad. But no one warned me that the fiercest war would wait for me at home, wearing the face I loved most. The wheels of the plane screeched against the tarmac, jolting me from a restless sleep. For a moment, I sat there, disoriented, staring out at the misty gray morning that wrapped around the airfield. Home. After 12 long years deployed across the world, fighting wars most people only heard about in headlines, I was finally home. I pictured her, Amanda. Her smile, the way she used to jump into my arms without caring who was watching. In my mind, she was still the young woman who had promised to wait for me, to build a future together on the pieces of whatever I could salvage from the chaos overseas. As I gathered my duffel and made my way through the airport, every step felt heavier. The thought of surprising her, of seeing her face light up, had been the only thing that kept me sane through the worst days. The thought of our house, small, modest, but ours, filled with laughter and Sunday morning coffee, had been my anchor. I spotted my truck immediately in the long-term parking lot. She said she kept it maintained for me. As I slid behind the wheel, a sour smell hit me. Cigarettes. Amanda hated cigarettes. Strange. I shook it off. Maybe a friend borrowed it. Maybe a mechanic had been careless. It didn't matter now. The drive home was a blur of familiar roads and unfamiliar billboards. The town had changed, shiny new gas stations, fast food joints where fields used to be. But as I pulled into our street, something else gnawed at my gut. Our house looked the same from the outside, neat lawn, porch light left on like a beacon. But when I opened the front door, it was like walking into a stranger's life. No "Welcome home" banner. No running footsteps. Just silence. The living room was different. Colder. Minimalistic. Half the photos of us that used to line the walls were missing. The worn couch where we spent countless nights tangled together was replaced by a sleek, modern one I didn't recognize. I set my bag down with a dull thud. Amanda? I called. No answer. I wandered into the kitchen. It was spotless, sterile almost. A single wine glass sat in the sink, lipstick stained. Not Amanda's usual color. A bottle of wine on the counter, half drunk. 2 coffee mugs in the dish rack, not matching like our old set. Maybe she'd been busy. Maybe she was just at the store. I told myself these things, but they tasted like lies in my mouth. Later that evening, she arrived. She didn't run into my arms. She didn't cry, or even smile much. She stood there in the doorway, keys in hand, her body stiff like she was bracing for something. For what? You're home, she said, almost mechanically. A half-smile flickered across her face and died just as quickly. I pulled her into a hug anyway, feeling her arms wrap around me loosely, like an obligation. Her scent was different too, something sweet and cloying, unfamiliar. I wanted to surprise you, I said, forcing a grin. Mission accomplished? Yeah, she murmured, stepping back, avoiding my eyes. That night, small things kept poking holes in my peace. She flinched when I reached for her hand at dinner. She scrolled her phone under the table, screen tilted away from me. When I asked about her work, she gave short, clipped answers. She didn't ask about my tours. She didn't ask about anything. In bed, we lay side by side, inches apart. She said she was tired. I stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the shallow rhythm of her breathing, wondering when my home had turned into an empty house. I told myself it was just the adjustment. We'd been apart for too long. People change. We'd find our way back to each other. But deep down, in that part of me trained to detect danger before it struck, I knew. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The next few days blurred into a haze of careful observation and choking doubt. Amanda tried to act normal as a woman who barely looked her husband in the eye could manage. She went to work early, came back late, always with some vague explanation. Traffic. Meetings. Deadlines. I wanted to believe her. God knows, I needed to believe her. But when you spend enough years in foreign lands where betrayal could wear a friendly smile, you learn to trust your instincts more than people's words. The first crack showed up on a Wednesday. I was in the study, dusting off old photo albums, trying to find pieces of the life I remembered. One of the albums slipped from the shelf, and when I bent down to pick it up, I noticed a folder tucked away behind the books, something Amanda had hidden. Curiosity wrestled with a growing sense of dread. I opened it. Inside were unopened letters, addressed to her, from a name I didn't recognize. Kyle. The handwriting was hurried, emotional. I unfolded one. I miss you every second you're not here. Last night was incredible. I can still smell you on my sheets. My hand tightened into a fist, the paper crumpling between my fingers. I forced myself to breathe. To read more. The letters spanned months. Sometimes they were tender. Other times desperate. But always intimate, too intimate. I slammed the folder shut and leaned against the desk, head spinning. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was before I came back. Maybe, but no. One of the letters mentioned a date that had passed just 2 weeks ago. While I was boarding a plane, dreaming of coming home to her, she was lying in someone else's arms. I sat there for a long time, staring into nothing. When the shaking in my hands finally stopped, I moved to the bedroom. Amanda's purse lay on the dresser, half open. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it. But Normal had left the house the moment I stepped through that door. Inside, among the usual clutter, I found her phone bill. A thick stack of printed call logs. Kyle's number showed up again and again, late at night, early mornings, during lunch breaks. Sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes for hours. I flipped further. A new credit card statement. Strange charges caught my eye. A luxury hotel across town. Dinners at upscale restaurants we'd never been to together. Men's cologne from a boutique store. The final nail was a receipt. A jewelry store. A gold chain, for Kyle, engraved with initials that weren't mine. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in my hand. Every laugh she shared with me over the phone from deployment, every time she said she missed me, she was already gone. Had she ever really been waiting? Or had I just been a convenient ghost funding her new life? I heard the front door slam, Amanda's voice calling out, "I'm home." For a few terrible seconds, I considered confronting her right then. Hurling the evidence at her feet, demanding answers, watching her squirm. But something colder, deeper inside me whispered. Not yet. I needed to know everything before making my move. I needed control. So I tucked the folder back into the shelf, shoved the papers into my jacket, and wiped every trace of anger off my face. When Amanda walked into the room, I smiled. The way a soldier smiles at an enemy who hasn't yet realized they've already lost. The days that followed were a slow, deliberate march toward the inevitable. I watched her closer now, every word, every glance, every text she thought she was hiding. And the more I saw, the less I recognized the woman I'd once trusted with my life. Friday night, I decided it was time. Amanda came home late again, blaming some emergency at work. I was waiting for her in the living room, sitting in the old leather armchair she used to curl up in beside me. The house was dim, lit only by a single lamp. Outside, rain battered the windows. She dropped her bag on the floor, gave me a tired smile, fake, and started to head upstairs. "Amanda," I said quietly. She froze. "Yeah. Come sit down." There was a weight in my voice that made her pause. She glanced at the stairs like she was considering making a run for it. Then she forced a laugh and walked over, sitting across from me on the couch, arms folded tight across her chest. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and spoke as calmly as I could. "How long have you been seeing him?" Her eyes widened, just for a second. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. "Who?" she asked, her voice a little too high, a little too innocent. I smiled. A cold, slow smile. "You know who." Silence stretched between us like a tripwire. Finally, she exhaled sharply, looking anywhere but at me. It's not what you think." I sat back, giving her space to hang herself with her own words. "He's just a friend," she said weakly. "Someone to talk to. I was lonely, and you were gone for so long." I nodded slowly, pretending to consider it. "A friend who buys you jewelry. A friend you meet at hotels." Her head snapped up then, panic flashing across her face. "You went through my stuff." "I came home to a stranger, Amanda," I said, my voice rising despite myself. What was I supposed to do? Pretend I didn't see it? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. No words came out. Then the doorbell rang. Amanda jumped like she'd been shot. I stood, moved to the window, and peeked out. Standing there, dripping wet under the porch light, was a man I had never seen in person, but felt like I already knew by heart. Tall. Smug. Wearing a leather jacket and carrying a cocky half-smirk like a badge of honor. Kyle. Perfect. I opened the door. "Hey," he said, flashing a grin. "Amanda here?" Behind me, I heard her mutter a curse under her breath. I stepped aside without a word. Kyle walked in, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floor, giving me a nod like I was some insignificant doorman. Amanda sprang to her feet, her voice shrill. "Kyle, you shouldn't be here." He shrugged. "You said to stop by." The way he looked at her, casual, possessive, made my hands itch to break something. Instead, I turned back to Amanda. "You invited him?" "I didn't think you'd be home," she blurted, then clamped her mouth shut, realizing what she'd just admitted. Kyle laughed under his breath. Awkward. Something in me snapped then. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Something colder. Cleaner. I smiled again. "Sit down, both of you." They exchanged a look, Kyle half chuckling like he thought it was a joke, but he sat anyway. Amanda hovered, unsure, before sinking back onto the couch. I circled them like a drill sergeant addressing raw recruits. "You," I said to Kyle, "have been screwing another man's wife." "For how long?" Kyle leaned back, cocky as hell. "A few months. Maybe longer." "Does it matter?" Amanda's face crumpled. "Kyle, stop." But he just laughed. "Hey, you asked." I stared at him, at her, and felt the last remnants of the life I'd fought for burn to ash inside me. "You're right," I said. "It doesn't matter." Amanda stood up then, desperation in her voice. "Please, we can fix this. I just got lost. I didn't mean for it to happen." I held up a hand. She fell silent. "You made your choice," I said quietly. "And you can live with it." Kyle grinned, clearly thinking he had won. He had no idea what was coming. Amanda reached for my arm, tears in her eyes now. "Please, just give me another chance. We can make it right." I looked down at her hand like it was a spider trying to crawl up my skin. Then I shook it off and turned away. "You'll hear from my lawyer on Monday," I said over my shoulder. "I suggest you get yours ready." And with that, I walked out the door into the rain, not bothering to look back. I didn't need to. I knew what I'd left behind. And now, it was my turn to plan. It's funny how clarity comes not with anger, but with silence. I spent that weekend in a small, cheap motel off the highway. The kind where the paint peels from the walls and the vending machines only take quarters. It fit my mood perfectly, empty, forgotten, cheap. I stared at the ceiling most nights, the static hum of the old air conditioner buzzing in my ears. I didn't drink. I didn't lash out. I didn't even cry. I planned. Because after everything I'd sacrificed, years of blood, sweat, and sand, I realized something simple and brutal. Forgiveness is mercy. And mercy was no longer part of the mission. Monday morning, I made the first call. A lawyer. A real one, the kind you call when you don't just want a divorce, you want to leave nothing but scorched earth behind. A friend from my military days connected me with her. Her name was Claire Hamilton. Cold. Sharp. Unapologetic. Perfect. We met at a quiet office downtown, her walls lined with diplomas and case photos like trophies. "You're a little different from most of my clients," she said, steepling her fingers. "You're calm." "I'm not calm," I corrected her. "I'm focused." She smiled thinly. "Good. That'll make this easier." I laid it all out, the letters, the receipts, the dates, the faces. Claire's expression didn't change, but her pen scribbled like a machine. "Adultery in this state still matters," she said. "Especially if there's financial misconduct involved. Community property laws mean you're entitled to half, unless we can prove dissipation of assets. If she spent your money on her affair." We hit back. She slid a document across the table. "I'll need full financial records. Every account. Every transaction." I signed without hesitation. "Also," she added, almost casually, "do you have anyone who might be willing to help us? Someone close to her?" That's when an idea sparked in my mind. Emily. Amanda's younger sister. Always a little suspicious of Amanda, always warmer toward me than toward her own blood. Over the years, she had confided things to me, little complaints about Amanda's selfishness, her reckless spending, her secrets. I hadn't spoken to Emily since I got home, but now was the time. I met her at a coffee shop across town, out of sight, out of mind. She spotted me first, waving hesitantly. Her face was pale, her eyes wary. "I heard," she said as she sat down. "Amanda told me some version of it, anyway. You okay?" I gave a tight smile. "I will be." She fidgeted with her cup. "I'm sorry. I knew something was off with her for a long time. I just didn't know how bad it had gotten." "Emily," I said quietly, "I need your help." She blinked. "Help how?" I leaned forward. "I'm not just divorcing Amanda. I'm taking back everything she tried to steal from me. But to do that, I need information. Documents. Proof. Anything you know, anything you can find." Emily hesitated. For a long moment, she chewed her lip, staring at her coffee like it held the answer. Then she looked up at me, and I saw it. The decision. "I'll help you," she said. "She deserves it." That night, Emily texted me from Amanda's house. Photos of hidden bank statements. Screenshots of private conversations between Amanda and Kyle. Even records of wire transfers, money Amanda siphoned from our joint account to cover hotel stays, gifts, trips. Dissipation of assets. Exactly what Claire needed to bury her. Each photo was a knife, but I welcomed every cut. Each betrayal hardened me a little more. By midnight, I had a full dossier ready for Claire. And I wasn't done yet. The next phase was psychological. Subtle. Ruthless. Amanda and Kyle would start to notice things. Mysterious calls to Amanda's job, hinting at personal indiscretions the HR department needed to review. Credit cards suddenly declined at restaurants. Friends pulling away after receiving anonymous packages filled with screenshots and evidence of her cheating. No threats. No crimes. Just exposure. I wasn't going to jail. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to let the truth suffocate them one slow breath at a time. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't fire and fury. It's silence. It's watching them destroy themselves. And I had nothing but time. The first rule they taught us overseas: control the battlefield before the first shot is fired. That rule applied just as well here, even if my war zone was a quiet suburban neighborhood instead of a dust-choked valley halfway around the world. By the time Amanda and Kyle realized something was wrong, the walls were already closing in. It started small. First, Amanda's main credit card was frozen. She tried to pay for groceries one afternoon, and was forced to leave her cart full of overpriced organic nonsense at the checkout line when the transaction failed. I had quietly flagged her purchases with the fraud department, citing unauthorized charges, and had the card shut down pending investigation. Small embarrassment. Public humiliation. A crack in her carefully crafted life. Then came the calls to her office. Anonymous tips. Nothing illegal, just concerned citizens asking if her company knew about certain activities that might tarnish their reputation. I didn't even have to be specific. The suggestion alone was enough. Within days, Amanda's manager summoned her into a private meeting. From what Emily told me later, they placed her on a professional conduct review, corporate code for start packing your desk. Amanda was unraveling, but Kyle was even easier to dismantle. A few anonymous emails to his employer, containing a curated package of screenshots, hotel receipts, steamy texts, calendar invites. Kyle's company had strict rules about extramarital activities between employees and clients. I made sure to highlight them in my message. 2 days later, Kyle was fired. No severance. No recommendation letter. Just a cardboard box and a security guard escorting him to the parking lot. Good. Meanwhile, Claire, my lawyer, had filed the divorce papers. Not quietly. We served Amanda at her office, in front of her co-workers, with allegations of infidelity, financial misconduct, and breach of marital duties. No whispers now. No rumors. Cold, hard facts delivered in manila folders for everyone to see. Amanda called me that night. I let it ring. I didn't need to hear her sob stories, her excuses, her half-truths sprinkled with crocodile tears. Instead, I met with Claire the next morning to plan the next strike. "You're ahead," Claire said, glancing over the paperwork. "Asset freeze is in place. She can't sell or transfer anything without court approval. We've locked down her accounts. You've crippled her financially." I nodded. "Not enough." Claire gave a thin smile. "I like the way you think." There was still the matter of the house. I had no intention of giving it up. The house Amanda and Kyle used like a base of operations for their affair while I was risking my life across oceans. Claire filed an emergency petition to grant me exclusive occupancy, citing emotional distress and the misconduct on Amanda's part. In simpler terms, Amanda was about to be legally kicked out of her own home. I stayed invisible, pulling strings in the shadows, watching her life cave in piece by piece. Emily fed me more intel almost daily. Amanda and Kyle were fighting now, loud, messy arguments. Accusations. Blame. Apparently, it hadn't taken long for Kyle to realize Amanda wasn't the dream girl he'd imagined, just a broke, desperate woman with no home, no career, and a soon-to-be ex-husband who wasn't playing nice. Kyle started pulling away. Late replies. Cancelled dates. Lies Amanda could taste even over the phone. Ironic, really. Amanda had traded away everything for Kyle. And Kyle was already trading her for a cleaner escape. Perfect. The final blow came sooner than I expected. Emily called one evening, her voice shaky from excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she said. She caught Kyle with another woman. I sat back in the chair, a slow satisfaction spreading through me like whiskey on a cold night. "Tell me everything," I said. Apparently, Amanda had shown up unannounced at Kyle's apartment. Found him half naked with a blonde in a leather jacket, someone younger, wilder, hungrier. There had been yelling. Crying. Begging. Kyle had laughed in her face. Amanda, the woman who once thought she could juggle lies like a magician, was left standing in the rain, mascara running down her cheeks, screaming into a night that didn't care. I closed my eyes and smiled. Mission accomplished. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. This was about freedom, carving my own life out from the wreckage she left behind. Amanda's ruin was just collateral. I still had one final act to orchestrate. Something permanent. Something she couldn't crawl back from. Because wars don't end with a few victories. They end with surrender. And Amanda didn't even know it yet. But she was about to lose everything. The night before I made my move, the sky opened up. Rain hammered the streets, turning gutters into rivers and washing the world in gray. I sat in my truck across from what used to be our house, engine idling low, watching as Amanda's bedroom light flickered on and off behind the curtains. She was packing, probably. Court had finally granted me exclusive occupancy that afternoon. Amanda had 48 hours to vacate. 48 hours to dismantle the life she built on lies. I watched the windows glow, then fade to black. Good. She wouldn't be coming back. The house stood there, proud but hollow, just like the marriage it sheltered. Memories clung to it like old wallpaper, Sunday mornings making pancakes, Christmases in front of the fire, tearful goodbyes before each deployment. It should have been sacred. Instead, it had become a crime scene. And tonight, I was making sure there'd be no going back. I slipped out of the truck and moved across the lawn, silent as a ghost. Every step rehearsed 1,000 times in my mind. I had already disconnected the security cameras earlier that day, a little outage Amanda would assume was from the rain. No witnesses. No electronic trail. Inside my jacket, I carried a plain can of industrial-grade expanding foam, the kind contractors use to seal concrete cracks. The kind that once it sets, doesn't come out. I worked quickly, methodically. Every sink drain. Every toilet. Every shower pipe. The foam hissed quietly as it expanded deep into the walls, hardening into stone. Next, the air vents. A little powdered fish meal, tucked neatly into the ducts. Invisible to the eye, but give it a few days and the entire house would smell like a rotting corpse. Unlivable. Unsellable. Unsalvageable. Amanda had poisoned our life. It was only fair the house reflected that. When I finished, I stood in the middle of the empty living room. Our wedding photo still hung over the mantel, untouched. Us, smiling. Believing. Blind. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I took it down, set it on the floor, and shattered it under my boot. No rage. No triumph. Just the cold satisfaction of cutting the last string. I left through the back door, locking it behind me. The rain swallowed me whole as I crossed the yard. By the time Amanda came back, it would already be too late. The foam would cure overnight. The rot would start within days. And the house, just like our marriage, would be a ruin no one wanted. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. Instead, I sat by the motel window, watching the first gray fingers of dawn creep over the horizon, and felt a stillness settle in my chest. Not happiness. Not even relief. Just peace. Real, bone-deep peace. For the first time in years, the war inside me had gone silent. Amanda tried calling later that week. She left voicemails, first confused, then furious, then sobbing. I never answered. What could I say? I was busy living. Busy forgetting her. And as the weeks turned into months, the life we once shared faded like a bad scar, there, but no longer tender to the touch. Amanda lost the house eventually. It went into foreclosure. No one wanted it once the stench spread. Her credit tanked. Kyle was long gone. From what I heard through the grapevine, Amanda moved into a cramped apartment on the other side of town, working retail, barely scraping by. No more brunches with friends. No more Facebook updates about living her best life. Just silence. Exactly what she deserved. Some nights, when the rain falls just right, I sit by the window and think about everything that happened. Not with anger. Not with sadness. Just a quiet understanding. Sometimes, you have to burn your old life down, so you can build a new one from the ashes. And that's exactly what I did. Time has a way of sanding down even the sharpest edges. Weeks bled into months. The war was over, but rebuilding a life is slower, harder than razing one to the ground. I moved into a small house just outside town. 2 bedrooms, a worn porch, and a backyard that needed mowing twice a week. It wasn't much, but it was mine, bought outright with what Claire had salvaged for me from the divorce settlement. Freedom smells like cut grass and strong coffee, in case you're wondering. Word of Amanda's downfall made its rounds, as small-town gossip tends to do. She spun a version of events where I was the villain, of course. A cold husband. A man who changed after deployment. A heartless brute who abandoned her when she needed him most. I let her talk. People believe what they want to believe. I wasn't going to waste another breath correcting lies. The truth, the real truth, sat quietly between the people who mattered, my closest friends, a handful of family who saw through her facade from the beginning. Emily kept in touch. She told me Amanda had tried to rekindle things with Kyle after the foreclosure, but he'd laughed in her face, called her damaged goods, and blocked her number. There was no comeback for Amanda. No miracle redemption. Just the slow, grinding reality of consequences. Sometimes people ask if I ever felt bad about what I did. Here's the honest answer. I felt something. Not guilt, no. Not triumph either. It was something heavier. Something closer to acceptance. I wasn't proud of what I had to become to survive her betrayal, but I wasn't ashamed either. I did what had to be done. She chose the battlefield. I chose the terms of surrender. One cold October morning, about a year after the divorce was finalized, I found myself walking through the farmer's market downtown, something I never had the time for before. That's where I met her. Maggie. She was working a little booth, selling homemade candles and handmade leather journals. She smiled at me without a hint of agenda, just a real, easy smile. We talked. Laughed, even. It felt strange at first. Like trying to walk again after crawling through mud for too long. But something inside me, something I thought Amanda had killed, stirred to life again. Hope. Small. Fragile. But real. I didn't rush it. I wasn't that man anymore. Maggie and I moved slow. Coffee dates. Long walks. Honest conversations without masks. She knew about my past. I told her everything, not because she asked, but because I wanted her to know who she was dealing with. She didn't flinch. She just took my hand, squeezed it, and said, "Sounds like you've carried a lot. Maybe it's time you put some of it down." Maybe it was. Maybe that's what healing really is, not forgetting the war, not pretending the scars aren't there, but choosing not to live in the trenches forever. One night, standing under a sky so clear it looked like it had been scrubbed clean, Maggie asked me if I regretted anything. I thought about it. About Amanda. About Kyle. About the house and the foam and the stench of rot that once mirrored my own heart. I thought about the man I was when I boarded that plane home, and the man who came back. And then I answered honestly. I regret trusting the wrong person, I said. But I don't regret fighting for the right to start over. She smiled and leaned her head against my shoulder. And just like that, I realized. I had survived. I had won. And I had finally come home.